was no stranger to loss in his life. He lost his mother, and his parents lost many of their children as well. Hello, welcome to Mix It Up, Black History and the Restoration, where we mix up a recipe while we mix up the restoration and learn about early Black members of the church. My name is Taylor Ricks, and today we are going to be talking about Henry Alexander Leggroan. You'll remember that 2 weeks ago we learned about Ned Leggroan, and he was married to Florida, and they were in slavery in Mississippi. Well, this is their son, Henry. Florida died and left Ned to raise Henry on her own, and so this is his story. Today we're also going to be making some rolls, which I know many of you probably have a yummy roll recipe. I'll share mine with you because it's super simple. But my cute grandma, it is Mother's Day weekend, and she requested a creamy potato soup that I make that she absolutely loves. It is so easy. You put all the ingredients in the crock pot, and then you can just use an immersion blender or a hand mixer to mix it all up after it cooks, and that is it. So I'll share that recipe with you, but it wasn't really worth watching. So we're gonna just form these rolls while we talk about Henry. So like I said, Henry's mom, Florida, passed away when he was a young child, and so Ned was left to raise him on his own. And because his parents were both born in slavery and slaves when he was born into slavery as well until the law changed and they were emancipated. And you'll remember his dad, Ned, met Susan Reed and married her, and she had 2 sons from a husband that had passed away as well. And so they met and married, and they decided to head west to Salt Lake before becoming members of the church. And they brought little Henry with them across the plains. And they came with Ned's sister Amanda and her husband. So they came all the way to Salt Lake before they were ever members of the church. And after they lived here a few years, they became members. And that is when Henry also became a member, although we don't have his exact baptismal date or record. We're just aware that that is when the rest of the family got baptized, and throughout his life, the records say that he was a member. So it suggests that he got baptized at the same time with his parents here in the Salt Lake Valley. So Susan pretty much raised him and was considered to be his mom. And so his mom and dad, Susan, had many children. He was part of a large family. Susan had 8 children, and including Henry. And so he had many siblings. And his parents lived in Salt Lake and Mill Creek area for a long time. And when Henry became an adult, his parents moved to Idaho and took some of his younger siblings with him. But since he was an adult, he stayed here, and he married his wife, Esther Jane James. You'll remember Jane Elizabeth Manning James from a few weeks ago. She walked across the plains and found and met Emma in the endowment house and became friends with Sister Emma and Joseph, and she helped take care of their homestead and things like that. So that is who Jane is. She's one of the most well-known early Black female members of the church. So Henry married her granddaughter, and her name's Esther Jane, so she must be probably named after her grandma, Jane Elizabeth Manning James. So that's kind of fun. We talked about Jane many weeks ago, towards the beginning of this series. It's so long ago I can't even tell you when it was. So they got married and they settled in Mill Creek, and they were in the Wilford Ward in Mill Creek. That is where many Black members of the church settled, and they were all in a similar ward. So they created somewhat of a community there. So Henry and his wife ran a fruit farm there. They mostly grew peaches, and people remember trading their delicious peaches for other fruit like apples and other crops that they grew. But their fruit farm did not produce enough for that to be Henry's only income. So Henry also worked on other people's farms. He worked on the Spears family farm, And then he also worked as like a laborer to help build and construct roads to help supplement his income. So he was multifaceted and had many jobs to support his family. You'll remember that Ned, his dad, did the same thing. He had multiple jobs to support his family, but his main job was a farmer, and he settled his farm in Idaho. When he did move to Idaho, when Ned moved to Idaho, the family worked really hard to stay in contact. Right at first, it was definitely more difficult, but as time went on, Ned got a car. He was able to earn money to get a car, and then the families were able to see each other a lot more often, and Henry was able to see his parents more often, and they did keep in touch, which is great. I was so happy to read that. So Henry and Jane, they had 7 children. Their names were Hiram, Sarah Ann, Henrietta, Gilbert, Edward, Russell, and they had a baby girl whose name I do not know, but she unfortunately passed away as an infant, and their son Gilbert passed away at the age of 7 years old. So Henry was no stranger to loss in his life. He lost his mother, and his parents lost many of their children as well, and so that means he lost multiple siblings. So it's so sad every time to read the story of loss in these individuals' lives. The church records show that they attended church regularly for many, many years throughout his life. However, some journals and different statements from people that knew him say that he kind of lived on the margins of the ward, and they felt like it was apparent that he felt the racism in the ward, and he didn't feel like he completely had a place there. So they would go and they went to church and everything, but they never were really fully immersed in their ward setting in that Wilford ward. But when he was just a couple months away from 80 years old, he passed away, and he had his funeral in the Wilford Ward's meeting house. The bishop there conducted the funeral, so that further shows that they did stay active throughout their lives. And Henry was described as a large in stature man who was really wise, kind, and gentle, and everyone knew him to be an incredibly kind person. He was buried among his other family members in the Liason Burial Gardens near Mill Creek, Utah, and he left an amazing legacy. There are many Leggroans in the Leggroan family to speak about, and Henry is a huge part of that as the oldest son of Ned and Florida and Susan Leggroan. That is the story of Henry Alexander Leggroan. Thank you so much for joining me for Mix It Up, Black History and the Restoration, and I will see you all again next week. Goodbye.